please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated.
Excuse me.
Tonight, we've changed a little bit the timing of the agenda in order to accommodate Mr. Schmidt and the New York City DEP, for going to be giving us a presentation. So we appreciate that. And then also we have a HR interview candidate. So we wanted to get those two up in front. That being said, then we'll move back to the regular order of things for the rest of the agenda. So I want to just thank everyone for being here. Later on, I'll have some comments about COVID and the status in the county. We had a briefing today and are in regular contact with county and the county executive Marcus Molinaro, but I'll talk a little bit about that later on and where we are in the county. We got a pretty good full report. So right now I'd like to have a motion to adopt the agenda.
Make a motion to adopt the
second it.
agenda.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passed. Next one is the motion to acknowledge the minutes of the July 26, 2021 meeting.
I'll move it.
Okay, move and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passed. So right now we, turn the floor over to George, and we'll. Why don't you introduce yourself? You've been here before, and but it's been a little while. But what we wanted, George, to do is to give an overview of, I think, very good progress and where we are and where we're heading. I had a good chance to talk with him beforehand. So, George, all yours.
Will do. My name is George Schmidt. I'm a portfolio manager with New York City DEP. We are building this Water for the Future project, which is a major reconstruction of the Delaware Aqueduct that goes from Newburgh. Actually, the aqueduct goes from the Warsing area up in Sullivan County all the way down to West Branch Reservoir in Carmel. The project basically is looking to bypass a leaking section of the aqueduct, 2.5 miles. We're building a 2.5 mile long section, new section, and one of those ends is tying in right here down in the Chelsea area of Wapager. This is Phil Simmons. He's our permit coordinator. He's been working with the town since 2011, so coming up on 10 years now. Back 10 years. Basically, we're going to give you an update. It's been a while since we've really had any major outreach to the town on anything, so we'd have some outreach on some other items, and everyone thought it best to give a brief summary of where the project stands since we last talked. So this first slide is an aerial of the site there. It's 199 River Road, just north of the Chelsea Lumber Company there. You can see the crane on the left side. The shaft is right next to there. The shaft is 700 feet deep.
Microphone.
And
And George, put the microphone a little bit closer to you. Thanks.
700 feet deep, and the tunnel has been connected from the Newburgh side 2.5 miles over to our shaft. Next slide, please. So what we're going to talk about today is update on the progress, our upcoming work schedule, both prior to the shutdown and during the shutdown of the aqueduct, which is for us two totally separate things, but probably for you guys really not too much difference. Status on the replacement of the noise blankets around the perimeter fencing, and any open discussion or questions that you all may have. Next slide. This is really just a schematic of the tunnel. So the pinkish gray, sorry, I'm colorblind, I don't deal well with these colors. That's existing aqueduct. We built the new shaft on the Newburgh side and the new shaft on the Wapager side here starting in 2013 and finishing in April of 2016. And in June of 2016, our second contract came in and started excavating the tunnel, 12,500 feet long, which is roughly 2.5 miles. And there's a secondary drainage tunnel. You'll see that little curved section on the Wapager side here. That allows us to drain water from the existing section of the aqueduct once we break through to collect the infiltration water that we're expecting to have from the leaking area of the aqueduct. Next slide. This is a picture of the boring machine. This is the machine that excavated the The tunnel, the bulk of the tunnel, for the most part, it's 21.5-foot diameter. That part of the machine there, it's basically just a big tin can, but it's 60 feet long. I want to say it weighs 200-plus tons, and it tows behind it 400 feet of gear that powers the pumps and the electrical and the grouting and all the other components, ventilation, all the other things that are necessary to run the machine. So basically, it's a state-of-the-art machine. It costs like $30 million, and basically allowed us to penetrate through the faulted areas that were on the west side of the Hudson River, and not have that water infiltrate into the tunnel and cause any problems, which is part of what happened back in the 1940s when they excavated the existing aqueduct. Next slide. This is a video of the breakthrough. This was August 13th of 2019 at about 7 o'clock in the morning. This is the bottom of the shaft on the Wapaton side. So that basically, that was, I think about 7 o'clock in the morning that day. So the machine ran for 19 months, which is right around what we expected it to go. Didn't have any major issues. It actually worked its way through the high water zone much better than we anticipated. So we were very happy with that. Next slide. There you go. So this is a picture of the machine as it hauled through. It basically was right on target. I think it was 1/8 of an inch off, over 2.5 miles,
Wow.
which is, I mean, it's amazing what they could do with these things, between the surveying and everything else. So that hold through was August of 2019. Next slide. These are some photos of taking the machine out. Again, we have to take it out in pieces because it's so big. The cutter head, I think, came out in 5 pieces, and then the main tin can part, which is the shield, came out in 4 separate pieces. And then that last bottom right there is part of the backup trailing gear again, which powers all of the components and the utilities that runs the machine. So the machine basically thrusts itself forward, and it tows behind it on rails this 400 feet of backup gear. Next slide. These are some other photos of the steel interliner. Again, this tunnel was built differently than we usually build our tunnels because of the faulted rock zone on the west side of the river. There's 9,000 feet, which is roughly 75% of the tunnel, is lined with a 1-inch thick steel pipe that's 16 feet in diameter. These sections that the contractor brought down were 40 foot, brought down 40 foot at a time. They weighed like almost 100,000 pounds. And there were 230 of those pieces sent into the tunnel, welded the joint, send the next piece in, weld the joint, send the next piece in, weld the joint. So it's a very repetitive process, but they worked through this. They had a great setup for getting all the preparation done, and they were able to send the pieces down and get them welded relatively quickly. Next slide. The next step is the concrete lining of the tunnel, and I'm showing here the lining right at what we call the portal, which is where the tunnel turns into the vertical shaft that comes up here in Wapager. So the top left photo is the existing tunnel that's concreted already. You can see the rebar that's sticking out through it. The top right photo is some of the reinforcement steel on the portal itself. This water is coming from a reservoir that's 840 feet above sea level. And at the bottom of that shaft, it's 600 feet below sea level, so it's roughly 460-something PSI of pressure. So it's a huge amount of water pressure, so these things are built very strong. Next slide. Next step here was to pour the concrete on our way coming up the shaft that met up with the existing shaft that was built in 2013 to 2016, and that was about 50 feet, but it was mostly the transition area and the shaft. Again, you can see all the reinforcement that goes on there. Very strong structure at the end of the day. Next slide. This is our access pipe. This was the last step that we're coming into right now. So the shaft is 700 feet deep. The top 200 feet of the shaft now has an 18-foot access pipe that will allow us to go down and access the tunnel in a way that allows the tunnel to also be watertight. So this access pipe comes all the way up to the surface. It has a huge 2-inch thick conical cap on it that's 8-foot diameter, and it transfers into 18 feet. And then that pipe is 1.5 inches thick all the way down. And that was our last step. We just finished backfilling that last week. So we're about 20 feet down from the surface right now, and we're going to start building what we call the access chamber. So now the pipe penetrates up to the surface, and it's going to get a big, huge elliptical cap on it. So that allows us now, when we shut the aqueduct off, for the aqueduct to be watertight. Once we break through into the existing aqueduct, if something happens and we have to turn both aqueducts on at the same time, this one is already set up to be watertight. So we don't, that was part of the planning that we did over the last, 10 to 12 years prior to really getting a lot of this work started. Next slide. Part of the work with the agreement with the town and the site plan approval is to perform a survey of the roadway condition of River Road. So we do that 2 times a year, along with a rep from the town. We also do a walkthrough of Chelsea Road, which is the county-owned road, with a rep from the county as well. And I think the last one we did was, I want to say it was in middle of June.
Of this year?
Yes. Next slide. This is a map of the entire project, Newburgh and Wappinger, of all the well monitoring that we do. I think there's 14 that are on the Wappinger side off the top of my head. I believe a couple people have opted out of the in-house monitoring that we've done, but we're still doing remote monitoring and taking basically piezometer readings of the water levels in people's wells in and around the area of the site there. Next slide. So upcoming work, I broke this down into work that we have to do prior to the shutdown of the aqueduct, which is going to be October of next year. So we're going to finish excavating for the access chamber, which is a 50-foot by 50-foot by 35-foot deep chamber, which basically where the shaft cap is and all the access and utilities, it's going to be buried underground, so you won't see it at the end of the day. But it's, again, a big, heavy concrete structure. We're installing a 30-inch drain line from the new shaft, that's there to the existing brick structure that's along the street. That will allow us to collect and pump out the infiltration water, as I was saying earlier.
Right.
The section of aqueduct is going to be abandoned. Once we break into the aqueduct, that water has to be controlled and it has to be pumped out. So that 30-inch water line, the drain line, will allow us to pump it from the new shaft to the existing shaft and then out to the river. And we have a specific speedies permit from that, from DEC. It's already set and ready to go. Installation of power and communications from the new shaft structure to the existing shaft structure. That just allows us to make sure we have everything running and communicating with the existing system. And replacement of the noise blankets around the north, the east, and the south perimeters of the fencing area on the site. And we expect that all of this work is expected to be done by late January, early February of next year.
Have I asked, have you seen the noise blankets lately?
We have had an issue with getting the noise blankets reinstalled.
Have you seen them?
I have, they're on the site.
And do you saw the condition they're in?
Yes, they have mold
They're
on them
black.
for the most part.
They're black
yes.
mold.
Yes, so we've had that mold tested. It's not hazardous at all. We had it tested. We have a contractor.
Can I see a copy of that report, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
We have a contractor on board. Was supposed to start today, actually, but was canceled with the rain. So they're starting this week on the removal and the replacement of that curtain.
Thank you.
Next slide. Okay, so the shutdown is basically we're dewatering the 45-mile-long Delaware Aqueduct from, again, the Warsing area to Carmel. 220 million gallons of water, something like that. So that'll be the first thing we do. That'll take about 3 weeks. We will go in and excavate the last 100 feet of tunnel between our existing aqueduct and our new bypass tunnel. We'll be blasting for approximately 5 weeks. We recently wrote a letter to the town requesting that we extend the blast hours till 8 p.m., which was approved, I want to say, 2 months ago, somewhere around there. We're going to pump the infiltration water to the Hudson River through our existing chamber and stilling basin. And we're going to install the concrete plugs, which is basically the main hydraulic and structural component that will divert the water from the existing aqueduct through the new section of the tunnel. And that work's expected to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from October of 2022 through April of 2023.
So what happens to the old sections?
It's going to be concreted in on two ends, so that's going to act as like a plug, or they call it a thrust block. So as the water comes in, it's going to divert into the new section of the tunnel.
Right.
There's a 50-foot-long concrete block there, and it comes around to the other side, and there'll be a 50-foot-long concrete
So you
block.
don't fill in the whole
No, no,
expanse?
no.
You
It'll-
just let the
it'll
water
in
fill
with
in?
wa- It'll fill in with water.
Okay, so just again, the date was 2022 through 2024?
No, the date is October 2022 through April of 2023, so roughly
23.
6 months.
And there'll be cement delivered on an ongoing basis with
Yes,
that?
the cement probably will only be probably less than a month. It's only 120 feet of concrete that they have to do.
Okay.
Next slide. And then the last part of the work we're doing will be the closeout work after the shutdown, where the contractor is demobilizing all of his equipment and materials, where we do the final landscaping, new fencing, the removal of those green container boxes and the noise blankets, putting up of new fencing. The new shaft and chamber structures are going to be buried underground. I think there's only a small, like 4-foot-high concrete bunker that just acts as an air vent. And right now, that work is scheduled to be completed by the end of 2023. However, if the city has an issue with the shutdown itself of the aqueduct, we've put contingencies in the contract to roll over that work because it's seasonal. The shutdown, it needs to be done between October and April simply because they can't do it in the summertime because of the water demand. So if there, for whatever any reason, drought, water quality issues, and the work gets rolled over to the next year, there's potential of the project ending in 2025. But right now, we're very confident that we'll have everything ready to go. And basically, the contractor schedule has them being off the site by the end of 2023.
Okay.
Questions?
I'd like to see the report of the roads,
Yep.
and
think
I'd like to
Tim-
have your
Tim-
business
Tim should
card
have one.
and your business card, please. I understand the importance of this. Like I said, I was on the planning board when this was going on, and we got approved. However, the residents of the area, the traffic, the trucks are causing a problem. Bond trucks are going up and down that road all hours of the day. They start at 6 o'clock in the morning,
Correct.
and they go until like almost 11 o'clock at night.
On certain occasions, yes.
Okay, well, can we address that somehow? Because again, the residents are really, their quality of life has changed immensely. The noise is immense. And trust me, they understand how important this is to New York City. However, maybe we can sit down and we can talk, because I have a lot of residents that are extremely upset.
Okay.
And the speed, the other thing, the speed on that road, those trucks are not doing 30 miles an hour. I'm requesting that there's more speed signs that say 30, and I am requesting that the sign at the end of Chelsea Road, that it's falling apart from New York City, where it says DEP.
Yes, okay.
So they need to be addressed, because there's a lot of traffic on that, and school's going to start.
Yep.
And these kids are going to start going back to school, and there's going to be a lot more traffic. And having trucks going up and down that road, going over, I would say at least, I'm not a cop, I don't know, I don't have a radar thing, but they're going way over 30 miles an hour. So that needs to be addressed before there's a catastrophe. Now, I understand the paving was done on River Road North, which is great.
Yep.
And it was done all the way up to maybe Thorn Acres. But from Thorn Acres all the way to Chelsea Road, it has not been paved. Thorn Acres is
Oh,
at the top of the
county
hill.
road?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Booth Boulevard.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't paid by us. That was paid by the county.
No, not Thorn Acres, up to Thorn Acres was paved by the county. But because of the trucks going down that road, from that point to the end of Chelsea Road where 9D is, the road is a mess. It's heaving, it's falling down. I have a neighbor telling me every time a truck goes by, she hears it in her house at night. So I need to have that addressed. So I would look forward to meeting with both of you. And if I have to bring in Mr. Balkine from the county, I will do that
Okay.
so I can help these residents.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
What was the start date of construction on this? Or not exactly, but
January 2013.
Yeah.
There was a separate contract that excavated the shaft here and in Newburgh, and then the
Right.
second contract, their contract started in July, of 2015. However, they were not working at the site until June of 2016.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I remember having conversations 4 administrations ago when this first started. You know, at the end of the day, with due respect to my colleague in Ward 2, I understand there's an impact, but at the end of the day, I mean, this is an engineering marvel that's occurring in our town here that documentaries will be made about. This is a significant piece of critical infrastructure for New York City. Conversations that we had in 2011 resulted in infrastructure for the town of Wappinger eventually. My question to Jim, and I don't need an answer right now, but based on the fact that the dates have been pushed back, when would the infrastructure that was put in place for this project, when would that be dedicated to the town of Wappinger? Would that be after they're completely done, or how does that?
Which infrastructure?
The water mains, the,
They were all dedicated already.
Yeah, they're all
Okay.
ours.
They've all been
But
accepted.
further to, I think, part of what question you haven't asked, Bill, is I was talking with George, and he said that going forward, from now on forward, they won't need any more additional
Okay,
water
yeah.
than currently
Right.
being consumed. So therefore, I told him we will be sending a letter shortly,
Mm-hmm.
you know, asking for the final waiver and permission to tie in, you know, the water to people along, you know, the road because of failing wells and so forth. So he you know, said, Jim, so we should get that done
Yeah,
and
so,
send that
so
off.
there is an intermunicipal agreement between New York City and the town of Wappinger, which provided for the construction
Right.
of water mains to the site. And as part of that agreement, one, for the term of that agreement, the term of the agreement is for the length of the project. So
Right.
to the extent that the project,
Right.
you know,
I believe when we first wrote the agreement, I want to say it was 2012.
yeah,
The shutdown was expected to be this fall in 2021.
yes.
Since the
Correct.
second project started, we pushed that off
Right.
a year to fall of '22.
Yeah.
So there's some milestones that were in the project which varied over time from the construction aspect of it. From the infrastructure work on our side, that's pretty much now all done.
Okay.
So we're in the process now of finalizing the contracts that we have with our contractors to do the work, to get people in Chelsea connected, and also now, you know, with respect to reimbursement, New York City DEP has agreed that, you know, we can provide a portion of the money to the residents in Chelsea who
Hookups.
had hooked up on their own, because when we started this process, we didn't, New York City made a commitment of a fixed amount of funds, and the town board did a very good job of being a good steward of those funds and
Right.
stretching it as far as possible. So, and we did that in phases, and that was all contemplated at the beginning. It was a very well-drafted agreement, and everybody has been, you know, very, very cooperative. New York City DEP has been cooperative. The world hasn't been as cooperative as
Right.
the parties.
And I want to thank you, and I want to thank CPL for moving on the reimbursement for these residents, because it has taken a while.
Yeah, you know, and that was really COVID-related, so, because there was, you know,
I understand that, but
Sure.
it still
I
took
know,
a while.
I understand. And,
Thank you.
So, and
So-
I,
But again, you know, I'd like to reiterate,
Sure.
Jim, we need that letter done.
Yep.
ASAP, because we have more than, well, we have triple the capacity we had before.
Right.
Right, and we have failing wells all up and
Yeah.
down that pipeline, so,
Right.
you know, we want to be able to start tying those in, you know, as soon as possible.
right,
So
and
that-
and that was a function of the agreement, was a certain
Right.
commitment for a certain amount of water to service the
And then,
site.
you know, the final thing is, you know, I'd like to have also in that letter, so we can state that we'd like to sit down with DEP in a reasonable time frame to discuss the price of the water access, not that we're going to access water,
Correct.
but it's a great, you know, it's a rare thing on this side of the river, and certainly something that gives us additional, you know, comfort, because again, we have meet the qualifications for the
Sure.
backup of the water, so.
Right,
that's-
and back back to that, the original conversations pre-2011, the importance of not only having the ability to provide water to enable this project to occur, but to have the ability
Right.
during an emergency,
Yep.
was the original conversation, having emergency access to that water, because the great irony in this town is the area of the town that had the least amount of water had the most amount of water running under it.
And the closer to it. But the closest,
So,
that is the closest to the
So-
river
so
and to
we-
the water,
we
so.
are- we're very,
And we
uh,
don't get it.
we're very lucky to have an incredible water system in this town that we have taken very seriously over the last X number of decades. And we have a very capable water operator who we've had for probably almost 50 years at this point. But that said, we believe as partners in this, as you reach your goals, we certainly would like to ensure that there will be some reciprocity in some way, shape, or form in the event that we have a significant catastrophic failure on our own system. Thank you.
There's always the future. And we have to
Absolutely.
look out for the future
Yep.
and plan ahead, so thank you.
Okay. Thanks. No further
Can I-
questions.
can I
Thank
have
you,
your
George.
cards?
Thanks.
Your
Yeah.
cards?
I don't have a card, actually. I can send it, contact info to Judith,
Yeah.
What's your phone number?
347 5.
And your number, please? I'll reach out to both of you tomorrow.
I do thank Judith for helping to set this up.
Yeah, she was
Yeah,
instrumental.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Okay,
Thank you for taking the
thanks.
time.
Okay, do I have a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of an HR interview?
I make a motion.
Okay. move-
Second it.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, any nays, abstentions, seeing none, we'll go in executive session, hopefully fairly short. Okay, that's for the purpose of interview of a new job candidate. So we'll be back in hopefully a few minutes.